welcome to the TFR studio. And today I've got huge pleasure in introducing Dr. Benedict Okiorama, Executive Vice President of the African Exim Bank, and Renee Amambang, the Group Head of Commodities at EcoBank Transnational. We're here today to talk a bit more about how Africa is being financed. Huge growth opportunities there, but how are these going to be paid for? And I'd love to hear a bit more from you guys about the your thoughts on the pockets of growth and the opportunities and what's going on.
Thank you very much. As you know very well, Africa has been growing very rapidly in the past few years. But recent events appear to indicate that there might be some breaks in some economies, given the developments in metals and oil prices.
The oil price has been a real problem, hasn't it?
Yes, but what we see is that the developments in oil prices will give a boost to some economies and decelerate some. The major oil producers such as Nigeria, Angola, and to some extent the emerging ones like Ghana, and to some extent Egypt, are likely to see a slight weakening in the economic growth rate. Also, the metals producers, especially those in southern Africa, are also likely to see some weakening. But others, generally, because of the huge share of oil imports in their, foreign exchange needs, and also in the fiscal arrangement, they're likely to see better performance.
Renee, you were talking to me earlier about some of the soft commodities and the agricultural areas of growth. You've got any more thoughts on that one?
Well, what we've seen in the recent past is that there's a lot of liquidity coming to the African markets. The markets are awash with pockets of liquidity coming from China, coming from the Middle East, coming from the US, both from banks and non-bank financial institutions, alternative funds, hedge funds, family offices, who are looking for more secured structures to participate in the commodity trade finance business in Africa. So yes, we've seen structures for export of agricultural products in East Africa, for like tea or cocoa in West Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire. We've seen some very new kinds of financing from some of the international players.
And would you say that the structures of those financings have slightly changed from the original traditional commodities finance models as some of the value add is going on in country? How has that affected the financing? Are we seeing more receivables? Are we seeing more supply chain? What are your thoughts on that?
Most of the financing that we are seeing is pre-financing, mainly based on collateral management structures. Some form of securitization of the asset using collateral management structures. So the investors want to have some control. They want to have a view on the kind of asset class that they are investing in. So we are seeing a lot more collateral management structures on financing of the soft commodities coming out of Africa.
Well, that's good for the collateral managers, isn't it? They must be getting quite a lot of business. We were talking to some of those guys in Lusaka, weren't we? Drum, yeah. And the other point about on the receivable side, I'm going to ask you to talk a bit more about that, because you were talking to the ITFA about how that trend was taking off a bit on forfeiting and factoring. Any thoughts on that, Dr. Orama?
Yes, given the changes that were happening in Africa, we're beginning to see a lot of demand for investment goods into Africa because of the need for investment in creating manufacturing capacities in certain kinds of infrastructure. So the demand for investment goods is rising on the import side. And because the demand for investment goods is rising, the market for forfeiting is beginning to re-emerge in Africa. And in fact, we make bold to say that Africa is likely to be the next big forfeiting market.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear.
Because the former Soviet Union used to be, Africa now presents an opportunity because the funds that want to buy those receivables have the same concerns about Africa as they used to have for the former Soviet Union. And they also have the same opportunities because many countries across the continent need those investment goods. So apart from ECA financing and supporting them, you have to have other instruments. And we've seen a tremendous growth in our own portfolio for this kind of business.
But we still think that the African corporates are challenged because with all of this growth, there's need for infrastructure. So there's need for more for work in ports. There's need for more logistics around warehouses. There's need for more roads. So we still don't see enough financing coming into that longer projects, which will now help the value chain financing or help export or process or add value to the soft commodities. So it's still very regrettable that almost 90% of all the cashew nut produced in Africa, whether it's in Tanzania, Guinea Conakry, or Cote d'Ivoire, is exported raw and not being processed in country.
We need to get that.
And we are trying to do something about it.
But tell us what you're doing.
We decided to take on the challenge, but starting with the low-hanging fruit, cocoa, because Africa overall produces about 80% of world cocoa, and only about 20% is processed within Africa. So we in African Export-Import Bank decided that we would do what Renee is talking about. But we want to set an example. So we set an objective for ourselves to create processing capacity for cocoa of about 35% in Africa by the end of 2016.
We've had some plants coming up quite recently. I remember
yes,
seeing
and we are well on the way to that. We created good capacities in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Cameroon. We are about to finance some projects there, also in Ghana. So we are doing a lot, and we believe that we will achieve that objective. And the idea is to make sure we involve all the parties. We're working with major trading, an American trading entity, which we bring in to become an equity investor. And I must say that we are receiving very strong support for the German government for that. Who have provided funding for us to support it through the KfW. And they supported strongly, and some other European governments have who find the initiative very supportive. Have been very supportive of us. So we believe we will achieve that, and when we achieve that, we're able to demonstrate that you can do the same for rubber, you can do the same for cotton. I know the Islamic Development Bank through the Islamic.
They've done some great cotton deals recently.
They are trying to create some hub
the
for cotton.
Structures,
Also, they are trying to create some cotton processing hub in Benin Republic. So we discussed with them kind of a sharing of experience. And so we believe, as Renee said, we're not going to go all the way to chocolate yet. We'll go first stage to go from beans to raw materials.
Baby steps.
To raw materials.
Yes.
Because the beans are not raw materials.
No.
They are raw commodities.
Let's move on to there is a misconception about African risk, at least that's what I think. And it was something your president, Jean-Louis Zecro, was talking about when we last spoke. And the whole Ebola crisis does seem to have, in some people's eyes, coloured the whole continent. And in fact, it's just a small part that's affected. And other political and risk issues seem to be, as I said, colouring the whole continent. What are your thoughts on how to disabuse people of that?
No, I think it's a shame that this issue keeps on coming up. Because it's time we educate the world that Africa is a continent of 54 countries. Which has very distinct sovereign entities. And with all respect to my fellow brothers and sisters from the hit countries that were affected by Ebola, business has continued. They've been stoic, they've been resilient to the challenge, really all the difficulties in the countries that were affected. We saw how Nigeria itself dealt with the Ebola crisis. Nigeria dealt very, very seriously. Nigeria unified like one single person and eradicated the disease in under 6-7 weeks.
That's right.
So it has slowed down certainly business in some of those countries, but business continues to go. ahead in some of the other countries. There isn't Ebola in East Africa.
No.
And East African economies are growing. We're seeing lots of good news coming out of Rwanda, coming out of Uganda, coming out of Kenya. We see good news coming out of Mozambique. We see good news coming out of Zimbabwe. We see good news coming out of Senegal. We see good news coming out of Mali, Niger, in spite of some of the challenges that they have. So yes, there is a perception issue about Africa, but Africa is a very, very, very large continent with different geographic countries and different opportunities.
Yes, so to just add on to that, it was actually brought close to home for me.
Yes, of course. That's
because my daughter said she studies at the New York University, where she was coming to join us in vacation in Cairo.
Oh.
The roommates were saying to her, "Oh, what of Ebola in Cairo, in Egypt?" Of course, she was a bit flabbergasted because when they didn't know, and her own roommates didn't know the geography of Africa. However, having said that, I think that's where we need the press to follow up on what Renee just said.
Absolutely.
To educate the people, because Asia is not seen from the lens of Afghanistan. Why should Africa be seen only from the point of view of what happened in Somalia, for example? So you say the whole of Africa is on fire. Whereas some African countries are better rated than even some countries in Europe. Look at Botswana.
Thanks so much for this.
I think those who understand Africa, I don't know whether they are the ones who perpetuate it because of they play as niche players and then get very high margins which are probably unjustified because of wrong perception of risk.
I think to conclude and to sort of wrap, because it's been really interesting talking to you guys, I take it personally as my duty as a member of the press to get the message out there that Africa is open for business and open for trade. And it's working with specialists and experts like yourselves that I think will help get more deals on the ground and out into the ports and into the hands of importers and exporters. Tell us a bit more about your perspective on that too.
Well, I just want to add that working with local indigenous banks, local partners, local content is very important in structuring every trade transaction. So I would encourage global companies, banks, and people trying to do Africa business to get more engaged with local content.
With African experts. Absolutely.
And for us, our role as a multilateral is make sure that all those who come in who have concern about African risk can have comfort. We have a country risk guarantee facility which is similar to what other multilaterals, some multilaterals who have appetite for Africa offer. So that we believe can help some investors to go in and learn about the continent and perhaps in the future invest without such cover.
That's fantastic. Thanks. Watch your space, everyone.